The water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.
Dave, welcome to Founder Secrets. How are you?
Taylor, I'm so happy to be here. I'm a listener and I can't wait for the icebreaker. So hit me with it, man.
I love it. All right. Icebreaker we're all going to answer is, what was the first job or project that made you realize you wanted to be an entrepreneur? I'm going to go first. I've thought a lot about this question because I don't know if it was actually, I could tell you there was something that my uncle said when I was probably 10. And I had read the Bill Gates book that he wrote called The Information Superhighway.
Wait, at 10 years old, you read The Information Superhighway?
Yeah. Didn't everybody? I don't know.
I didn't know how to read.
So weird.
Romania. So I read this book and my uncle heard that I was reading it because I was talking about it at Christmas. And he said, you know, on the internet, it's impossible for you to track how often things change. They just change every day. And for whatever reason, that line just blew my mind, that there was unlimited change, unlimited opportunity on the internet. And it was then that I was already into computers, but it was then that I realized that I want to do computers and the internet, and I want to build a business. So that was kind of, doesn't directly answer the question, but that's what came to my mind.
Now I'm super curious about all kinds of other things in your life. Like, did you have friends when you were 10?
Well, anyway, this podcast isn't about me.
You have to invite Taylor to your podcast and ask him all these questions.
It's a super impressive answer, but oh my goodness, you poor person.
Thank you.
Bill Gates, at 10 years old. I was reading my parents were trying to get me to read like just anything because I didn't like to read and let alone reading a Bill Gates book. Anyway, Flavio, tell me about you.
I didn't read a book till I was like 13, 14 maybe. So I'd say growing up in Romania, it was something I thought about. Even I was hitchhiking every day to this other town to play tennis. And I was constantly thinking, how can I turn that whole hitchhiking experience into a business? But that wasn't a project. I'd say probably after college in the US, and when I was working for the University of North Carolina, I started freelancing. And it was so great. These platforms like a Fiverr or Elance or these things helped me test my skills on a very low kind of risk level while I still had a job, and do random projects for people. And if they were unhappy, they didn't pay me, and that was it. But it wasn't any other risk. But as I took a few more of those, and they did pay me very, very little, I started thinking like, oh gosh, well, I could just do this. That could be a business, not a business I want to be in, but I guess it gave me like the confidence that if nothing else, I could take projects off of Upwork and make a living. So
I have so many observations. Number one, that explains your comment in a previous episode of yours about you wanting to be a tennis pro. If you weren't an entrepreneur, you'd be a tennis pro. So I understand the origins of that now. The other observation I have is you guys are just children, babies. You were like, when I was growing up, oh, stop it. This is all relative. When I was growing up, War Games was the closest we had to the internet. Like do you remember the movie War Games?
The movie, not actual War Games.
No. The movie War Games.
Either of them is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're going to Google War Games and you're going to find where you can watch it. It's a phenomenal movie from the 80s. And if at all you're interested in tech, War Games is such a great movie to watch. Yeah. So, all right. So the question was, what was the first book you read? Is that right?
No, the first job or project that made you realize you wanted to be an entrepreneur, Dave?
All right. So for me, this one is it's a super clear moment in time. I got my MBA from Penn State, and in between the 2 years, I got a summer internship with SAP, which most people are aware, a big German software company. And I was working in the Boston area, SAP facility. Really, really cool internship. Like I really wanted to work for them, one day because, big software company. I was into technology and software and process and all that stuff. And, on my last day, I was in my suit and tie, by the way. This was 1990 something. And on my last day, I'm walking out. My manager puts his arm around me. This is Mark at the time, again, mid 90s when you could put your arm around somebody at work. And he put his arm around me and he's like, Dave, just a little piece of advice advice as your manager. I want to encourage you to walk faster and smile less, because perception is reality. And I don't think it was that moment that I realized I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but that moment sat and brewed it sat there. It was like a seed in my head. And there was a certain point that happened, gosh, I want to say like 5 years later, there's a certain point that happened where that seed blossomed, and it drove my awareness that this life was not for me, of working for the big corporations where I'm reporting into a boss and so on. That's my moment, man.
So did it take, what's interesting to me about that line, and this is on your LinkedIn, so I was familiar with the quote.
Line. Walk fast.
How slow
smile.
do you walk, by the way? Do you walk really slow?
That was my question.
No, but I mean, first of all, at the time, Taylor, I remember him saying this, and at the time, I was super receptive. Like, I really wanted to work. I don't know why, other than they were just such a successful software company. I really, really wanted to be a part of that. It just really wasn't a good fit for me for exactly those reasons. But at the time, it made sense. I was like, yeah, I could totally do that. Like, you don't have to be smart. You could just walk faster and smile. That's so easy, right? But it's not.
So were you walking slowly and smiling a lot? Like, did you look like a jokester?
I think so. Think about it. Think about the exchange, the conversation we've had so far in this podcast, right? Like, I really enjoy people. I like talking to people. So given the opportunity, yeah, I would stop, try to get to know people. So walking slowly might mean like stopping and talking to people. But no, I think for a German software company, like the culture there is pretty deliberate. Like you get shit done. Like you do stuff fast and you're focused, and you go back to your cubicle and you keep doing what you do. That's just not, I don't know. That's just not what I'm made to do. That's not how I live. This has become now a mantra of mine. You can see over my shoulder, if you're looking at the video, I have this sign that says walk slow, smile more. It's become my mantra in life. Like, it's become the thing I live by. That moment was super impactful on me. And again, it wasn't till later that I kind of came up with this walk slow, smile more thing. And it's such a big part of my life and my kids' life. One of my kids made that for me just a couple of years ago. And so I live by that theme, walk slow, smile more. And it doesn't mean like literally walk slow. What walk slow means is stop and smell the flowers every now and then. Enjoy the journey. That's what walk slow means. Enjoy the journey, and smile more is pretty literal. That actually means just smile more.
Knowing you for close to 2 years now, you strike me as somebody who smiles a lot, as a happy person. So I think that this has had a profound impact. Before you get off this topic, I just want to ask, the guy who originally said this to you, does he know the impact on the life that he's had?
No, to be honest, I don't even know Mark's last name. I'm actually amazed I remember his first name being Mark. I can picture him. Like, I can picture him. He's everything you would expect at a big German software company. He's very well dressed, hair parted and combed perfectly. It was, he was a good guy. Like, there's nothing wrong with Mark. He was very capable of that culture, but it wasn't a fit for me. And I learned that when I was fired from my job a few years later.
All right, so let's jump to Peach. So you've had quite an entrepreneurial journey after SAP. So tell us about Peach and what happened with that.
So that's an interesting segue. So I did go work for I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers and then another small systems integration, big software systems integration company. And at a certain point, I was fired from that. And it had something to do with the industry, and that was around the year 2000 when the bubble burst and all that stuff. But I had the opportunity to go get another job or start something on my own. And with my wife's blessing, understanding that it's a much more questionable path to go start something on your own, I chose that path. And what I started wasn't actually Peach. It was a company called Boston Conferencing, right? It just started as something. And ultimately, over a course of 14 years, it evolved into what became Peach New Media, which was a learning management system focused on serving associations. That's our market. An association it's a tax type. It's run very much like any other business, but it's a nonprofit association of individuals in a certain professional or trade group. And so anyway, so it was a learning management system, built that over time. For many, many years, it wasn't even software. And then after about 9 years, the service evolved into building and developing our own software, which then we sold and started licensing, and it became very much SaaS. It wasn't a full SaaS company, but it was about 65% recurring revenue and 35% services when I finally sold that.
And you sold it. And can you talk at all about the sale process, or what did you learn? Did they come to you? How did you sell it?
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't intending to sell it at that point. I thought we had more to do, but private equity can be quite convincing. And to be honest, it got to a point where after several conversations with the same firm that I was talking to, and actually at this point now 3 firms had jumped in, and then it came down to 2, and so it was a regular conversation, and it got super exciting, not just because of the money that transpires when you sell a business, but it got exciting because it was kind of like the next stage of this business. The things I could do with it, with my team, and a very limited pool of money, wasn't anywhere near the life it could have if it joined forces with a much bigger entity. So we were a bolt-on to another company, and it went on, and it's continuing on. It's still in the marketplace, and now it was 2015, so that's like almost 10 years ago. And it's still living on. So yeah, the sale process was super exciting. I mean, I can go to a lot of detail for the listeners. I think we have the same listeners. So I have a podcast called EO360, Entrepreneurs Organization 360. And your listeners and my listeners for EO360 are very, very similar, might be interested in the details of that sale. But so I'm happy to drill down into as much as you'd like. But it was a roller coaster. The process took about 6 months. There's a lot of due diligence. The organization we worked with was AKKR, and they were very, very respectful. They stuck to their word. They were very honest about the whole process. It went on longer than everybody expected for various reasons, which made it quite stressful. But ultimately, it ended. The transaction ended quite well, and then I stuck around for about 9 months of my 1-year contract. And I found my own way.
So how big was this business when you sold it?
It was just under $5 million in revenue.
It was profitable?
Yeah. It was profitable. We were self-sufficient for, since the beginning, actually.
So you didn't raise any outside capital?
No, this company was completely grassroots, which was why it took 14 years to get it to, where it was at 5 million. And at the time we were growing somewhere around 20%, so it was a good growth rate. I think the business I have right now is much healthier from a financial perspective, but it was a much different ball game starting PropFuel than it was running Peach.
Because of having more funding?
That's a big part of it. Yeah. The funding is one part of it. The other part of it, though, is just having learned so much over the years.
Right.
When I started Peach, again, it wasn't Peach when I started, but when I started that business that turned into Peach, I was 30 years old and had never started a business before.
You were just a baby.
I was just a baby. At 30 years old. And then I sold that when I was about 45. And the next one I started when I was 46, 47, 48. I don't remember exactly, but I was, I was seasoned. I was like a fine wine at that point.
Like a teenager at that point. Right.
But also I had money, which meant, this is a very, very important variable in starting a business, right? I had money, which meant that I could go a few years without taking a paycheck.
Right.
Which is...
Did you have a co-founder for Peach or?
So Peach, that was an interesting journey. So at first I started it with a friend. Again, it was Boston conferencing in the early days. Started that with a friend. He was a passive participant, about a 25% owner. At some point, I bought him out for like $18,000 and a lap, right? That was a few years later. I was like, hey, listen, like you're in or you're out. Like either quit your job and join me, which I'd love, or let me just do this on my own because there's not enough for both of us. And so, he had a daughter going into college, and we came up with a number of 18K for some reason. And he had a laptop. I was like, keep the laptop and I'll give you 18K.
It's not even a new laptop. I thought you meant you were going to buy him a new laptop. You just
you didn't even buy him a new one.
We used one, $600 value.
A $5 million revenue business, let's say you're doing, I don't know, $1 million in profit a year. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And so when private equity comes, I'm just curious, I don't know how much you can share, but also just hypothetically in advice for others, what is a business like that valued? Is it do you take the 5 million and multiply it by a number based on your industry, or do you take the 1 million in profit and multiply it by a number? How did the private equity people value that business?
Well, that's the question. You said, how does the private equity value it, right? That's the most important thing because they're the ones that are actually going to check. The other important thing is how do you value it? Because you're the one that gets to decide whether or not you take that check. So there's two valuations that you're pitting up against each other. Oftentimes people choose a valuation based on EBITDA, right? There's a multiple of profit. Other times, oftentimes in SaaS, you take the recurring revenue and you multiply that by some magic number, which gives you a really rough number. Ultimately, it all comes down to like what do you need to make this number work? And so my conversation with them, and their model for valuing something like this is way more complex. I mean, if you give a business to private equity, I couldn't even begin to summarize how they value it. Like it's certainly not a multiple of the figure. I'll tell you that. It's super, super detailed in how they engage that. I mean, how they calculate that. But from a seller's perspective, I remember where I was when they called with the first offer. I was in the San Francisco airport. I had flown in for Dreamforce. We were Salesforce customers and flew in for Dreamforce. And I was in the airport waiting for my wife who was meeting me there. And they called and they said, well, we'd like to make you an offer. And they threw a number out there. And I had already prepared my response. Regardless of what the number was, I prepared my response. And it was, I'm really flattered. I appreciate that. However, that's not going to work from my family and me. In other words, and I told them this at the get-go. I was like, look, I'm not sure this is going to work because my number doesn't really match the valuation of the business. And so that was my way of trying to feel like, how much are they interested in this versus just looking for a cheap company to buy? And so they came back 2 days later with a bigger number that did meet my family's expectations. But the point is, like, you can.
How much higher did they go? Like, what percentage did they go up? Like 5%? Did they go up?
No, it went up. About 40%. And so their answer basically was take it or leave it. So what they did is give me an offer, and then they went up 40%. So like, this is it. Now, I don't know because I didn't challenge it, but they're like, this is it. I want an answer by end of day today. And we expect that you're not going to take this to anyone else and counter, right? So like, this is it. We want you to be serious about this. What's it going to be? And I accepted. So it was about a 40% bump, which was healthy.
But wait, I thought you said you had other companies in the running. I thought you had other bidders.
There was one other. Yeah. At this point, there was one other. And I did, of course, go to them and say, look, I got an offer. And And their response was, yeah, you should take that. So it really came down to just this one. So if it didn't work out with AKKR, it wasn't going to happen. Well, at least not then. So to answer your question about the valuation, the founder has a number, a magic number that is relevant to them. Rational or not, that's the number they would need to exit. Buying organization has a number that financially makes sense for them. And the trick is to make those match, right? And they don't always have to be rational. They don't always have to be to match your financials.
So then, okay, so can you share, was it on profit or more revenue? It sounds like it was more revenue because of the SaaS, software as a service business.
Doesn't matter. There was just a number. It doesn't, however you come to that number doesn't matter at all. They had a calculation that incorporated profit. It incorporated SaaS. It incorporated non-SaaS revenue. It incorporated churn. It incorporated growth rate. So they had an algorithm that came up with like a magic number that said, do not offer more than this. This is the maximum amount we will pay. And I have no idea how close we came to their maximum amount.
Well, I'm curious if you have a feel, because there's only, you sell them to associations, right? At this point, the software.
Yeah, I still do. And my new company sells to associations too.
I'd say it's different than selling into, say, small businesses or enterprise or SAP type companies, in that I think I would guess there's a more finite number of these associations and what they're willing to pay. They're nonprofit. You can only increase price so much for a learning management platform and various add-ons. So first, is it okay to assume?
I would challenge all of that, what you just said, by the way. I don't think this market's any different than any other market. Like you can't increase, you guys couldn't increase your price to your market dramatically without losing customers either. Like you have a finite number of customers in your space. And when you reach, and I didn't even let you get to your question, but when you reach the maximum, when you feel like your growth is slowing in a particular market, then you look for related markets to sell to. But that's just the nature of entrepreneurship.
I'm just curious for entrepreneurs out there, because actually I was just recently talking to an entrepreneur. It's also in a similar space, and I was kind of, he was thinking he was going to exit at 20 to 40 times ARR because he's seen some press release somewhere. So what I want to know, I guess, from you is kind of what's a fair range for an entrepreneur to expect in terms of a multiple? If you get to a 5 million, which is incredible in revenue, and say $1 million in EBITDA, what is a rough range? I know obviously there's a lot more variables.
I know I'm not giving you just a simple answer. For a company that is like 65% SaaS, marginal growth, marginal profit, right? You guys know the rule of 40. So at this point, we kind of just hit 40. We're probably growing at 20% and might have had 20% profit. I think the numbers were a little under that, probably like 15 to 18%. I mean, this is a little while ago, so I don't remember exactly, but I don't think it was even 20% either. So we were probably at like a 30, 35 number in the rule of 40. And again, 65% SaaS, something like that, you're going to get a lower multiple. And I always think about having a SaaS company now that's fully SaaS, almost like 99% SaaS. I think about it in terms of multiples of revenue. For my company now, my expectation, Taylor, I'd be curious what you think having a SaaS company too, but my expectation at a multiple would be a minimum of 6 times revenue. For a private company, and if you're public and big with a high growth rate and with low churn and all great stats, that number needs to go up. It's going to be 8, 10. I've seen, a couple of years ago, they were at 12 times revenue, which seems absurd to me. 6 times revenue is kind of what I would expect to see today for a full SaaS company. For a company like I had, it's going to be less than that.
So let's talk about, so you sold the business, stuck around for 9 months of the 12 that you thought you would. So you jetted out. And did you know immediately, okay, I'm going to start something new? You had such deep expertise in the association space. Or did the idea come to you when at what point did you realize, hey, I'm going to start this new business, PropFuel?
Yeah. Well, I really thought I would have stuck around for longer. It just was so hard. Like it's just like all of a sudden you got a boss and
it's like it's Mark again, putting his arm around you, like, "Hey, bud, Dave."
Yeah, it was the CEO. She clearly worked for a private equity company. I appreciate who she was, and I enjoyed my time with her up until the end, I think. But it just got to a point where it was nothing like entrepreneurship, and it completely brought me back to that SAP experience. And the culture, it was way significantly different than I expected, and so they wanted me out as much as I wanted out at that point. So I got that 1 year bonus that they promised if I would leave. So I remember calling her and saying, "Hey, I was thinking it might be best." And she's like, "No problem. Yes." Like, oh, so we're on the same page. All right. So Taylor, when I left, I wish I didn't do anything for like a year. Like I really kind of wish I just said no to everything. And I wish I'd let myself get bored, because that's something you rarely experience as an adult, is boredom. And I didn't do that. I said yes to everything. I started getting involved in nonprofits and boards, and I had 3 boys at the time, 3 boys in school, K through 12 era. And so I was super involved in their lives, and I have no idea what I did for that year. Like I have no idea how the time passed, but I never got bored. And I considered like, okay, do I write a book? Which is like, it seems like every entrepreneur does when their ego gets big enough, like just write a book. Everybody wants to know about me. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe there's like, everything's about coaching, that kind of thing. And concern is a little less about making money and more about doing something meaningful. And then it just came down to like, I missed this game of creating something. I was like, I just want to do something. So I called my partner now, Cameron, who I knew right from the get-go. He was my CTO at Peach. And I remember calling Cameron and being like, he had a job. He was still working for this company that acquired us. And I was like, look, I want to build a business. I want to do something. I want to do it with you. He's like, well, do you have any ideas? I was like, none. And he said, okay, so call me when you have an idea. So I called him every day. I was like, what about like a company store? What about birthday cards for people? And like, I had all the worst ideas you can imagine. And he's like, no, call me tomorrow. Nope, call me again. So finally he called me. He's like, I got an idea. He's like, and it all came from the culture we had created in my last company, which was just an awesome culture. And it was about recognition. Now, here's the funny thing. So I finally got him to quit his job, start a software company, giving recognition to people. And, 2 years later, we realized like, that's just we tried to pivot a whole bunch of times, and we realized that what we started wasn't at all what was actually going to work. And ultimately we created a forum. It's what we consider to be a conversational engagement, or it's a member engagement platform for associations. And as soon as we found that product market fit, and it took us like 3 years, but as soon as we found that, we started selling the product, and people were paying us more than we were receiving in the other stuff. And they stuck around. So like now our churn is less than 8% a year in revenue. We have our net revenue retention is over actually it's right around 100. Our growth rate we've been growing at like 50% a year for the past couple of years. It took a while. What we started wasn't at all what we set out to start. Like what we ended up becoming, where we found product market fit wasn't at all related to what we started in the beginning.
How specifically did you do that? Because I feel like people talk about this, but it's hard to do in my experience. It's hard. Did a customer ask to transition from, you started with like employee awareness or recognition? Yeah. And that's very different than kind of where you ended up. So did a customer request it? How specifically did you go, oh yeah, it's this idea?
Well, you start with a nest egg, so you don't need to get paid. Like that's really important. So that was helpful to have a runway, so that we could keep fumbling without actually making any real money. B is we kept experimenting. So we took our core product and we tried different language. We tried different markets. We tried adding new features that we thought were cool. And we had come from the association space, both Cameron and me. So we knew the association space. We just thought we were better than that at this point. We thought like, we're going to go we're going to be like the next Slack, and we're going to be like thousands of customers overnight. And, we had these dreams of selling to tons of small businesses at $25 a month. And it just didn't make any sense. And so I remember multiple friends telling me like, you should totally do this stuff for associations. Like a lot of my friends from the industries, like associations need this. So you should do this for associations and their members. And I swear to God, it was probably 6 months of me saying, no, that just doesn't make any sense. That wouldn't work. So it took a while for me to keep hearing people that knew me, knew what I was trying to do, and knew the association space to keep telling me like this was going to work in this space with a slight twist to what we were doing. And they were right. In fact, so I resisted the change that ultimately worked for several months until we're like, maybe there is something there. But to answer your question, it's just a lot of experimentation, constant ideation, a little bit of software development, a lot of conversations, but ultimately trying to sell something to a new market using different words.
Well, I thought it was the same market. Is it?
Again.
You're still selling to the association market, right?
Now, but back when for the first 3 years of PropFuel, we were not. Now we're 7 years into it, and for the last 4 years,
overlap. I guess is there any competitive overlap with your previous business?
No, the last business was a learning management system that hosts and distributes educational content for associations. PropFuel is about capturing insight and delivering a more personalized engagement for members. Totally complementary products.
Okay, and engaging members of an association. I'm thinking what would be a good example of an association? What's like?
Here's a good example: Entrepreneurs Organization. We're all members of Entrepreneurs Organization. I suspect some of the people listening to this might belong to EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. Most associations actually have the word association in their title, or society. Like
are they customers, by the way? EO?
They are actually. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's happened through a association management company that works with 16 chapters. And so we work with the association management company, and they work with the EO chapters. So we didn't go in through corporate. We went in through the bottom. We went in through the chapters. But yeah, we've got 16 chapters using PropFuel for member engagement.
And so member engagement just seems like this is something everybody struggles with. Right? Like in healthcare, it's patient engagement. In enterprise, whatever, it's employee engagement. And then associated
No.
member
Enterprise,
engagement. This is
customer. It's customer
engagement. Everybody's a constantly trying to like get people's attention to do stuff so they can show value to about the stuff they're doing. So how's it different than what do other people, like a MailChimp? I guess this is like emails and notifications and in-app, like, hey, we're doing this. There's an event there. It's just like peppering people with notifications is the way I would think of like the basic form of engagement, to be constantly in front of their face. Is that what you do? Or is it, I guess, what would you say is like the secret to your member engagement?
I mean, the premise of what we call conversational engagement is simply starts with the opinion that the way the world markets in general is broken, especially the way we're using email. It's just broken, right? Like we're constantly sending large groups of people a message with the hopes that they click on stuff, and we really don't know much about them. We know enough, maybe the better organizations know enough to maybe put a whole bunch of people into a segment, and they're like, so we've got this bucket of people that are all the same, and I'm sure if we just tell them the same thing, then some of them will click on stuff. But the idea is like with a broadcast message, we're sending stuff out there with the hopes that they'll click on them. Now, we know as entrepreneurs in the sales process, what makes a great cold outreach campaign? What do you guys think? What makes a good cold outreach campaign?
Short, effect, customized to the person. Feels like it was not written by a robot.
Customized to the person. I love the short, but what makes it effective is that it's short and it's customized to the person, right? So you just defined the characteristics of conversational engagement. The question, the real shift with PropFuel is rather than telling people things, rather than talking at people and hoping that we got it right, we're listening, we're asking a question. And that's the whole premise. Every single email that goes out of PropFuel is a question. It starts a little prompt. It mimics this conversational engagement, like a real conversation. And what we're doing is we're listening for a clue as to what needs, what interests, what's compelling this person, what would compel them to take the next step based on what we hear, either based on what answer they give to that question or how they answer the question. We have some AI that can analyze open-ended answers and so on. Based on how they answer, it triggers certain actions. And there's a dozen or two actions that might trigger from that one answer they give us. So now we ask a question, capture insight, and take action. And that's what makes this methodology of conversational engagement so much more effective than just spraying content out to the world, hoping that that it's going to resonate with somebody. We're creating relevance. You said, Flavio, did I say that right? It's not Flavio. How do you say your name?
Flavio.
Oh,
Yeah.
We have AI correct all instances of it changed wrong.
So with a little more hair, you'd be Flavio. Now you're short hair, you're Flavio. Okay,
Exactly.
so you said earlier, Flavio, that you said earlier that everybody's trying to get our attention. Attention is a currency for organizations that are selling things. And any organization that's selling things is an organization that should consider conversational engagement as approach, whether it's an association, whether it's a business, whether it's any kind of entity that wants your attention. They're more likely to get your attention if you give that person a relevant, short, Taylor, what'd you say? A short and tailored exchange, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what PropFuel is all about.
Right. One, you kept the same co-founder, right? So you started both businesses?
No. So the first company in 2001, when was it? 2001, I started the first company with a friend named Rick, and I bought him out a few years later. And then I met another guy named Johnson, and Johnson and I married our companies together when we were both about $1 million in revenue. And then I bought Johnson out, and then I sold the company, and then I started PropFuel with one of my employees from PropFuel.
He did not have equity.
Yeah.
You all worked together, but he did not have equity at Peach.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. He had, what we call phantom shares. It was like equity. He had some equity, but he was not one of the founders of the original company.
So that's interesting, right? There's some carryover of team, but heavy carryover of customers. And that,
well, wait a minute. There was actually significant carryover of team. I got my sales guy, my CTO became my partner. We hired another sales guy. We got a developer. So 4 people from my last company are now with me in this company. There was 0 carryover in terms of bringing customers. Well, that's not true. I did reach back out to a lot of those customers and say, hey, let me tell you about what we're doing. And we brought some of them.
Yeah. I think that this is interesting because people, when we think of an entrepreneurial journey, it's what are the skills that we collect and the people that we collect along the way, and what are the customers and the messaging. And listening to your story, I kind of view it through that lens of the lessons you learned back then, you were able to apply in the new business. The people you met back then, a lot of them you brought into this business. The lessons you learned from the associations you tried to move away from and go to different, and then you brought right back in to the business. And so to me, I'm struck by that. And it seems that there's a lesson there maybe for people early in their entrepreneurial journey. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like what lessons did you have for someone kind of early in their journey, especially given, you've had 2 very, very successful businesses here?
Yeah. So that's interesting. Your takeaways are, I cannot deny them. However, it's hard to tell somebody to get a ton of experience. What I would not recommend is waiting to start a business. Like, I know some people say you should go get a job and, have some experiences and meet people before you start a business. I think the risk with that is that you start making money, and if I wasn't fired, God forbid, if I wasn't fired, I might still be working for a company that was paying me a healthy sum of money, and I was checking in and checking out and going home with my paycheck. Like, that's hard to walk away from. So yeah, more experience is better, more people is better, but that just comes with time. The advice I would give is the same advice I give my 24-year-old son who has his business. I'll give him a plug. His business is Kona Brand, thekonabrand.com, Kona. And he sells Hawaiian flannels. And the advice I give him, and I talk to him a lot, I would say like 70% of our dialogue is about entrepreneurship. He's a real entrepreneur. And the advice I give him is just do something, take a step forward. So started this in college. The idea stemmed out of high school, but he started this in college with a grant, and he never even considered, I don't even know if he has a resume. He never applied for a job. He just went right out of college and started this business. And so the advice I would give is similar to that. It's just do something, take a step forward. It doesn't even matter what, because chances are whatever you start doing is not going to be what the business is in a couple of years. That's been my experience, at least for both my companies.
That's awesome. Well, as we go into the life hack here that we each share. I
love this part.
I'll start. I had a little bit under the weather, and You know what the hack is to avoiding sickness, guys?
No.
It's elderberry. Elderberry. That's it.
Wait, a hobbit?
What's
I don't
elderberry?
understand.
Well, there's
I read about
elderberry.
this in Lord of the Rings, I think.
You can have these elderberry in pill form or gummy form, and along with like zinc and echinacea, those three things like strengthen at least my immune system. So like if I feel an onset of some cold or something, you take these. I tell you guys, it's made a huge difference now for not just this particular cold, but like over the last year, I've been avoiding worse colds through these gypsy
It's
cures.
funny, Taylor. The one person who's sick is giving us advice on how not to get sick.
Why
That's
didn't I
true.
get sicker?
Well, he just had a son, so I
true.
feel like he's
Yeah.
getting
My immune
not
system
everywhere.
needs all the help it can get. So for those of you that need a little boost in the immune system without some heavy hardcore prescription medications, this is a much natural supplement way of doing it.
Love it. Dave, do you have one?
I do, yeah. So I about 2 months ago, a friend of mine was sad. And I said, "Why are you sad?" And she said, "Because I just got a new scale and it told me how out of shape I am." It told her weight, her BMI, her body fat-free body weight, the subcutaneous fat, the visceral fat, the body water, skeletal muscle mass, bone mass, protein, BMR,
Sounds amazing.
and metabolic age. Now, it may not be perfect because you stand on it for like 3 seconds and it gives you all that information. But I was like, I have to have this. And I bought the scale and it was I think they make them in hell. I'm not sure, but it's awful. Like you see all this information and as much as if you think you're fit, just buy the scale. But what it did is inspired me to do healthy things because I really want to see those numbers change. So I started doing 75 hard. You guys familiar with 75 hard?
Tell us what it is.
Oh my gosh.
75 days of 75 minutes or more exercise?
Yeah. So some guy, he's really mean. He like, when you watch his video, he's just like immediately just yelling at you over how fat and ugly you are. And and how lazy you are. So anyway, you started this thing, 75 hard. So I want to have two here. One is my Renfro. Is that what it's called? Renfro. It's, the app I have is Renpho, RENPHO Health. I'm not necessarily recommending that scale, but I think there's a lot of scales that do that kind of thing. That's just the one I have in the app. So I use that, and the way I'm improving those metrics, and it's working. Like it really is working. It's changing the metrics. Is this thing called 75 hard? And 75 hard is 75 days of 2 workouts. You have to like check all these boxes. 2 workouts. One is 45 minutes. Second, outdoors. One is 45 minutes indoors or outdoors. You have to drink a gallon of water, which is four of these 32-ounce things. You have to read 10 pages of a book every day, which actually is proven to be really cool. You can't drink alcohol, and you have to follow some form of a diet, right? So you can make your own diet or follow an official diet, but so 75 days of that. And some days it's okay. Not some days it's really, really hard. Like when you're traveling, if you do that, your numbers will get better. I promise. So that's my life hack is follow the data, track data in any part of your life where you want to improve, and then do the things that you need to improve.
What day are you on?
30. I'll tell you in a second.
So you're halfway through.
Yeah, I'm day 33.
Almost half.
Yeah, here, look. That's and they show you a little picture of what you look like when you started, but that's my little map. I'm on day 33 of 75.
All right. 75.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing. There's a 75 hard app that you can download, and that's where you can see the video of this guy yelling at you. I don't know why he's so mad at me. Seriously, I don't even know what I did. I just opened the app and he's so mad.
That's how they keep you motivated. That's 75.
What's yours,
Go, Taylor?
Mine is this. It's a Slack bot. So some people have heard of Zapier. One of the cool things about Zapier is that you can, so Zapier is like a connecting no code kind of way to connect systems together. There are Slack integrations inside of Zapier, and then you can trigger them on certain events. In other words, I have a Zapier that wakes up every morning at 6 a.m. and automatically it wakes up at 6 a.m. It goes and looks up sales data in this spreadsheet from the previous day, puts it into a Slack message, and it blasts it into a channel inside of our Slack. Now, this sounds kind of silly and simple. We started doing it 9 or 10 months ago. And it's had this, it started because I wanted the data. I wanted to look at it every morning. And now the company does it. And so it's this little bot that does it. I've changed what it reports on today. Like over time, I've changed what it reports on. Every morning, what it reports is what were the number of opportunities booked yesterday? And then it gives a goal, which I found also, that was one of the hacks I learned, is by adding goals in parentheses next to each one, it helps people understand, is this a good number? Like, should this be higher? Is this good? Did we meet goal? So number of opportunities booked yesterday, number of hand raisers yesterday, that's interested replies. How much in sales do we close yesterday? How many people are currently in trials? So how many trials do we have running right now? How many verbals? Those are people that are verbal, like closing contracts. How much MRR have we closed month to date? And what's the MRR of the business? Just looking at those numbers every single day, what I have learned is that they go up. That's my hack. My hack is measuring leads to improvement. And there's no better measurement than a computer that does it for you. A computer that does it and just spits out the numbers. And then every day, because what it causes is I look at it, and then over time, my co-founders start looking at it, and then it causes people to ask questions, because they're like, hey, why did that number go down? Hey, it's been like a few days of that. Hey, why is that number super up? Do we do something different? So it gets everybody engaged in a sales process that I think to a lot of people in the company can feel fuzzy. Like sales can feel very pipelines and systems and CRMs and blah, blah, blah. But by making it very, very simple numbers that you look at every day, it allows people to ask very specific questions, and they don't have to be a sales expert. So my life hack is to create a sales bot. And now every business that I have will have sales bots from the beginning. Like it'll just port on sales numbers that everybody can understand.
So we had a very similar hack, which is measure things.
There you go.
Look at the measurements, look at the stats, and then do something. It's acknowledgement, awareness. It's creating a process for something to be in front of you every day. Look at it, know what it is. And that in and of itself drives change.
What a way to close it. I'm going to create a 75 sales hard.
There we go.
Honestly, Taylor, you're onto something there.
75 sales hard. Dave, anything you want to plug? How can people get in touch with you? How can people find the pod? How do they reach out to you? Where do they find PropFuel?
Yeah, PropFuel.com. The podcast, if you enjoyed this, I think you might also enjoy EO360, Entrepreneurs Organization 360. That's on, all the podcast players. And if you're an association person listening to this, well, that's interesting if you are. And if you are, there's another podcast I do called Association Strong, very specific for associations. So you can go to associationstrong.com and sign up for that podcast.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, guys. This is really fun.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flavio. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down. Hey.